Welcome to the Culture Stoke podcast, where happier people lead to better results. Cheers. Cheers.
Been way too long.
Happy holidays and good Guten Tag.
Guten Morgen.
It is Blur's Day and on the holiday season, and we are here. And yeah, we're stoked. It's been a minute since we've been. It's been like 3 weeks, maybe, since we've actually sat down together.
Yeah, before Thanksgiving.
Yeah, it was before. I'm gonna give you a little. There we go.
It was before Thanksgiving.
Okay,
It was.
I've
missed your faces, even though I've seen you pretty much every day.
It's true.
In between there.
That's true.
In betwixt there, as it were.
We should try to put as much Christmas.
Whatever idea is about to come out, I don't want it.
I love it.
So not jingle in with that.
No.
See, Marty's on board. Why can't you just?
That was my one.
Just get on the sleigh.
I'm like Felice. Right? Nah, vidad.
All right, it has begun. It is the holiday spirit. Well, we're here in the studio again. Wes kind of came in with a thought, but introductions again, just real quick. I am Richard. I'm the host. This is Marty. He is to my left. He is the co-founder of Culture Stoke, and this is Wes to my right.
Hi.
That's a little.
It's a shout out to the Little Rascals.
Little Rascals. There you go. All you millennials out there.
It's a big shout out to Shelley. Loves that movie. We quote it pretty regularly. Pretty frequently. Frequently?
That's what I was going to say. Frequently? Doesn't make any sense.
It's a beautiful day.
What's your favorite quote in that movie?
Oh, I'll trade you a pickle for a nickel. Or what's your account number? 7? Try 8. 8. If you were my kids, I would punish you. If we were your kids, we punish ourselves.
That's pretty good. I don't remember any of those.
I wish that 95% of my knowledge wasn't movie quotes, but that's basically what I have.
Yeah, we got to get you on a trivia team.
You'll
clean up.
It is wild.
That's true. What is it? Bang the Drum. They have a trivia. I think we clean house.
If it's movie trivia, anything beyond that. If there's anything beyond that, and more specifically, movie quote trivia.
That's true. Yeah. Wouldn't do too well with like early, first century Roman Empire.
Well, I firmly believe that every person has like the genius. Like Michael Jordan, genius in basketball. Simon Sinek,
I already know where you're
genius
going with this,
and it's like.
It's unacceptable.
Who knew that? Like, it's like, oh, you know what? You're going to be the LeBron James of movie quote retention. It's the best. It's the best. Like the one skill I had.
I knew where you were going with that, and I immediately disapproved.
Wow.
Just because you are so much more than that. But Wes wanted to talk today. This term kind of popped up in our text as we were talking today, and it was just this idea of getting unstuck. Or how did you phrase it? You were just kind of like talking about this idea of being stuck and what it looked like to get out of it.
Well, I think the word has just been rolling around in my head, and probably from the last episode where Marty brought up the quote of what was the quote?
Oh, the difference between being in a groove and being in a rut is momentum.
Yeah, and so it was like I love that quote. Marty has said that to me on a couple of occasions where I have felt like I'm in a rut and not in a groove. And we mentioned it, and I know we talked about it a little bit on the last episode, but really just this like, well, how do you get unstuck?
Yeah.
Organizationally, from a leadership perspective, and even from a people perspective. But we're going to talk a lot about the workplace and organizations and leadership, but just remember that workplaces and organizations just people. So you can take a lot of these and at least make tacit or tangential connections to these to your personal life. So I don't know. It was just rolling around in the dome, and I was like, let's talk about how to get unstuck, because the holiday season is here.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you.
Yeah.
Sometimes
a little sticky.
Yeah, can be very sticky. So I don't know. It just was here. So I'm like, let's
touch it.
Let's unpack this. See what happens.
Let's unwrap it.
So when I read the text this morning, I immediately thought of a time when I was probably about 8 years old. My family went on a drive from Lopez Lake to Pozo, and you go along this high mountain road.
Yeah.
And so it's paved for a ways, and then it becomes a dirt road, and it's a little windy.
You go through
you go through some creek crossings.
Yeah.
It's an incredible
Beautiful.
drive.
Yeah.
So we went. This would probably been in the early '90s, and my dad's Oldsmobile. It was like a purple
Hell yeah.
station wagon,
Yeah,
Cutlass
it was.
Supreme Oldsmobile.
Oh, come on.
And
now.
we've gone out to Big Falls and others
Classic.
in non 4-wheel drive cars, and we made it probably about 7/8 of the way to the destination. And we're close. We let
So
okay,
close.
we just got to go down this way, and then there's a Pozo Saloon. We'll get a burger, and it'll be all great.
Done.
And we go around this turn, and the car, it looks, and I don't know. Obviously, I wasn't driving. I was probably trying not to annoy my sister in the back seat. And the car turns and just kind of slows down and stops. And there's like, I hear some interesting words up front. My mom has a little bit of a panicky look on her face. I hear the engine kind of, and we're not going anywhere. And immediately kind of came to mind of like, there are times in my life where I feel like I have turned around. Like I feel like I'm close to the destination. I'm not too far away. And then all of a sudden it's like, all right, I'm stuck here. And the first thing that came to my mind is when you are in a place where you're stuck, the first thing that you need to do is kind of get out of the metaphysical car.
Yeah.
You got to get out to
Right.
see how the heck you become stuck in the first place.
Right.
For sure.
And so this, whether it's within your personal life or as a leader at the workplace, getting unstuck, in my opinion, first requires perspective.
Mm-hmm.
You need to be able to look at the situation from an objective lens. One, how did I get here? What is the situation that I'm in that is maybe causing me
Right.
or inhibiting my ability to move forward,
Yeah.
and think of some contingency plans of how the hell to get out of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, you could even make the argument. I'm gonna argue, actually. Just
Do it. Do it.
No, I mean,
right,
it is
fine.
perspective, but I would even say objectivity is the first, like the ability to objectively perceive your environment.
I'm going to say you're both wrong.
We're both right. let's fight.
I mean,
no, it's true though. You know?
I just think the first one is like the acknowledgement that you are stuck.
Yeah.
there
Like,
we go.
Do you know what I
Okay,
mean?
fine.
But again,
Acquiesce.
I think they're all part and parcel, because you can't get the acknowledgement that you are stuck unless you have the perspective of everything
Right.
else in the world that's going on around you. And
Yeah.
so I just think the times in my life where I've had the most profound realization of how stuck I actually am was when I took that moment and I was just like, wow, I have been working a lot. And I feel like I've
working,
accomplished
like
nothing.
physically working, or
Physically, mentally, you're just really tired, and then you go,
what am I actually doing?
what am I doing? That to me is like because there's just so many people in my life where I hear them talking
Right.
and they're just so dissatisfied with where they are, with everything, and it's like, but then you're like, well, what do you want to do about that? And they're like, well, this is just how life is. It's like, that's not true at all. Like
Right.
there's lots of opportunities. So I think like the get out of the car thing this is like why I wanted to do this episode. It's like, well, when you get out of the car, now what? Like you've got because the first thing to solving a problem is admitting you have one.
Right.
Absolutely.
Right.
And then what's next? So like, how do we want to tackle the get out of the car metaphor? Like, what are the things that you all have done that you thought have been helpful?
I think you need to, once you're out of the car, you need to just be really real with just be honest about the situation.
Yeah.
And because there's a lot that we can do, like, oh, this doesn't look as bad as it is. Like, oh, it's just down to a quarter of the wheel well. Like, what if we kind of put it in reverse, rock it back, and see what happens? Like, and you might try that and then realize, oh, I'm now about 3/4 of the way in the wheel well, and this is, in order to get traction out of here, we're going to need to try and hunt for some sticks and see what we can do to get some traction around these tires.
Yeah.
And so they're in kind of looking at the situation both through the lens of like, yeah, you can accept that you're here. Like you don't necessarily have to like it, but I think there's that level of acceptance, because in terms of fighting I don't want to be here, I don't like being here, there's just a decent amount of energy spent in
just on
kind
that.
of just in that.
Yeah.
And that really inhibits one's ability to get solution focused about the situation. And so I think if there is that objectivity about, okay, this is exactly where we are, if we can get really clear on that, but even consider, okay, is this a health issue? Is this a safety issue? Is this a business issue that can be remedied, that cannot be remedied, etc.? We can start to approach the problem from a way that is going to lead us ideally to a faster resolution.
Right.
But if we just get spun up and thinking like this has gone wrong and that's wrong and this is and because we're in the situation, it's just going to get worse, worse, worse. If you take too high of a perspective, it can actually hold you back from thinking creatively to address the here and the now.
Well, I think we were talking about this the other day. Is like, how do you shoot that gap between like everything having so much meaning and everything meaning nothing, you know? Because like when you start getting too metaphysical, too existential about it, you're just like, none of this stuff means anything anyways. I'm 2 generations from being forgotten. Like, what's the point? Like, and so I mean, I
full
think
on existential crisis.
Yeah. So like, how do you find that like it's not all meaningless? Like this is a privilege to be alive. You know, it's a miracle that you're here. But like I was trying to noodle on like some of the more common causes of being stuck, at least in my experience, like the things that I have seen either personally have been in, or I see a lot of leaders and people struggle with. And like the first one is like the analysis paralysis. Like I just am going to spin and spin and spin. So I'm interested to hear about your thought. Like, so paralysis by analysis is just like, I don't want to move because like I don't know all the variables. And so I'm going to look at this from not just like a octagonal view or a hexagonal view. I'm going to look at like the deca, whatever, you know, the 100 million, like every single lens I got to look through before I make a move. Like, have you guys experienced that in your lives? Like, dude, or seen people, and like, what do you do to get out of that?
When you look at too many options, that can overwhelm. And I believe in order to focus on, well, it's important to look at it from different perspectives. I'd say maybe the perspective of a beach ball as opposed to like a
decahedron.
Yeah, that's
probably not a word.
Some large geometric shape with many sides.
It was convincing. It worked.
But the idea is that I think there's 2 kind of ways to look at it.
Yeah.
The first way you can look at it, you're like, it's gonna be hard.
Yeah.
And the other side is like, you know, is because it's going to be hard, I'm going to delay or put off making a decision or put off taking action.
Yeah.
Well, the consequence of that, it might be easier in the moment, but it's going to get significantly harder down the road. Sure. And so understanding that there is a time to consider, but then there's a time to act. And by taking too much time, you could actually ruin your choices and your chances for being able to act in a better, more expedient way. The difference between lettuce and garbage is time, and same with decisions. Sometimes if we don't act fast enough, we can get stuck that much deeper in our current situation.
Right, whatever the wheel's spinning.
And so when it comes to the analysis by paralysis, you might think, oh, I need to look at all these angles, but by doing so, how much time are you delaying actually taking action from it?
Right.
And if there is something that I would encourage, if you're a leader and you feel over 65 or 70% confidence, that should be your green light to go.
Yeah, just go.
You should, if you need to get to that 98, 100%, that is going to significantly.
Well, you'll never get there.
Yeah.
You never actually will get there.
No. And there's.
Ironically.
And the idea is just because you make a decision doesn't mean you have to be married to that decision.
Right.
Yeah.
You can make a decision, act, go a couple steps or even quite far down the path and decide, oh, you know, this wasn't the right direction. Let's now move. Let's make a better decision now that we have information because we've acted.
Yeah.
But
go ahead. Finish your thought.
Oh, but if we choose not to.
Right.
We don't have any information that we can go off of other than what's swirling around our heads or our past experience and maybe even fail to operate from our areas of imagination of what could be.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think the first thought that came to mind was, the difference between like we're in like the age of knowledge. There's so much information.
If you say so.
Well, I'm literally right here. Like here's knowledge happening. So it's kind of like Wes, always diminishing. Listen here. So I think the hardest thing, frankly, and I even think about it myself, the analysis paralysis for me often manifests in like research. Like I'm like, I gotta look. I'm gonna go and like, but I'm talking about the most minuscule, silly things. I'm like, I need to buy a case for my phone. You know how much ungodly time I've probably spent in the last 7 years researching?
You've been researching what case to buy your phone for 7 years.
No, but I'm just saying, like,
we need to get you into a hospital, bro. That's wild.
You're like, there is something wrong. No, but there's these arbitrary things that we tend to like hang our hats on, like, well, because there's so much thoughts and opinions. And I think we put an undue amount of pressure on ourselves to be liked and affirmed by people.
Yeah.
That a lot of times that, frankly, like even this is like, well, again, come back to the stupid phone analogy. I looked at this and I looked at the reviews and I looked at what people had to say about it. And I looked at what people thought of how it felt. And again, this is a silly analogy, but the idea for me is that I often find myself getting stuck in that loop of like, I need to know more. I need to know more before I can move forward. And to your point, the times that I've seen the most success, the times that I've seen the most momentum, getting out of a rut is when I had a bias for action.
Yeah.
Yes.
I took action and I didn't, sometimes it almost appeared foolish, but 90% of the time, it works every time.
Yeah.
No, it really does though. It's one of those things where if you prioritize action, you can always change. You can always tweak.
Yes.
You can always change course.
Yeah. You could return your phone case if you don't like it.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know.
Throw it in the ocean and
buy it
go
at
buy
Costco.
another. Well, don't throw it in the ocean. But I mean, the interesting thing is, and it's always going to come back to that mirror conversation and kind of knowing your proclivities. Like I am not one to. There's no like batter's circle for thoughts or actions. It's just kind of like I'm just going to go do that thing, and come what may. And I have to be very like sensitive to people that like aren't that, because like it's very easy for me to make assumptions about my software and go, well, just do something.
Right.
It's not that big of a deal. Like what's going to happen? You're going to fall and skin your knees. You're going to learn something and then it's fine. Like easy peasy. That breeds a lot of anxiety for folks.
Right. Yeah. You're not actually feeling what they're feeling.
But so I think for all parties involved, myself, I'm always going to say like, well, start with you. What are the things? And so when I'm coaching people through this and I'm seeing the telltale signs of a person that is in that analysis paralysis and they're stuck, it goes to, because you want to do all that research because you're worried about making the wrong decision. Right. And it's usually based in some form of fear. So what is it about that situation? Because, when I was in therapy, I have a what if thinking problem, just like, well, what if this happens? And then what if this happens? And then what if this happens? And my therapist was like, well, to stop circular thinking, you draw a line. So it's just like, you know what? I'm going to just draw a line. Like, so at what point in time, whether that's a timeline, it's like, I'm going to give myself 2 weeks to research this, or whether that is I'm going to enlist the help of a friend and say, hey, I need you to come up and I'm going to present my case to you. And then I need you to tell me that I've done enough research and give me permission to move forward. Can be
You
just
give
that.
me the go.
Yeah. You give me the go. Cause I think I think that fear-based that fear-based response to making a decision because I'm worried about looking like a dum-dum. I'm worried about losing some money. I'm worried about buying the wrong phone case. I'm worried about, maybe like the what if thinking of, well, if I make this decision wrong, it's going to make me look bad as a leader and people are going to question my leadership. The ironic thing about that is like, nobody has the expectation that their leader is going to be perfect.
Yeah.
It will undermine you wholly is if you try to present yourself as perfect and then never make a move on anything.
Right.
Because it's like, no, you're not perfect. You're just scared.
You're just not doing anything.
Yeah.
And not making a decision is a decision in and of itself.
Yeah. And that's deciding to not make progress.
I've decided to not do anything.
Yeah. So, I mean, like, I think that the paralysis by analysis, the things that I'm hearing is like, one, like find the line, you know, that was kind of my point. Like find the line of like, when am I going to just release myself? There was a leader I was working with, and she was famous for the, like, I reserve the right to get this wrong line. I'm not sure where she got it, but it's great. Like, I reserve the right to get this wrong. So like, at what point in time are you going to say, you know what, done my due diligence. Okay. I feel like I have looked at it from all pertinent angles that I need to. I'm going to reserve my right. I'm going to reserve the right to get this wrong. And I'm going to go this way. And then we're going to revisit it in 3 months or whatever. Right. But like, if you were to get, so like, that's my tip. But like, what would you say? Like, if you had to give like one piece of advice to a person, leader, when they're stuck in that like paralysis analysis.
Ruh-roh.
Yeah. If you're stuck in that analysis and you feel like you need more and more and more and more information, if you feel like you need an outside perspective, I would encourage you to think of, in your mind, first and foremost, decide this is most likely the path that I'm looking at. Mm-hmm. And then run it by somebody that you trust. It could be somebody who is, who could play the devil's advocate, or someone who can say, hey, this is what I'm thinking. Can you throw up any red flags? Do you see anything that might be missing here? And just have a secondary lens to talk things through, either reinforce your thinking or bring something up where, that's great. Mm-hmm. I might need to do things differently. That can give you just a little bit of that, not just accountability in terms of following through, making the decision, but can give another voice to the conversation beyond your own internal conversation with yourself.
Yeah. And I think we get in that echo chamber naturally. As leaders. We can kind of get in this thought that we have the answers, we have the thoughts, we have the direction. And I think to me, and not even formulate an idea, I'd say formulate the idea in a group. Yeah. Start it with people. Again, if you're a leader, start it with the group. Yeah. Because at that point you have that think tank, you have that built-in accountability where you're going to have people who have a more of a proclivity for action, and then those who have a proclivity to analyze. And then, there's tension that exists in that, but it's necessary.
I'd argue you need both.
No, you absolutely need both. But I think that I do think that what happens as leaders is that we tend to believe that somehow we hold the keys to the kingdom, that we've been placed here for such a time as this, and we have some sort of like proverbial like thing that like, oh, we have some sort of destiny. And it's really just like, no, like you just happen to be in a position where you're over people. Yeah. But your greatest asset is the people that you're over. Mm-hmm. And so if you can pull them in, even before, as soon as you start feeling stuck, likely you probably got stuck because some sort of thought process you have, or maybe it's organizational, but still, to me, it's like, if you're in that car, the Volkswagen, or what'd you say it was, immediately takes off. Who's in it with you? Who's in there with you? Yeah. Who's in that Cutlass Supreme with you? And looking at them and saying, okay, hey, what do you see? What do you see? What do you see? Mm-hmm. That creates just this crazy ability to get out of your head. Cause I know me, my head is a little.
Well, that sounds like it's like now there's like shared ownership of, hey, we are all in this together. So now because I do think there's a bit of when leaders take on that mantle of like, oh, well, this is all on me. It's like, well, yeah, because you're doing that. Like you've done that. You do it to yourself. Yeah. So if you say, hey, as a group, we're going to get together and we're going to look at this from all angles. I want you to play devil's advocate. But at the end of this meeting, we're going to make a decision and we're going to go forward together. Yeah. That's a lot of we talk. Yeah. And so now it's not it's not me. It's not this. I'm not making this decision in and of myself. It's we're going to go forward. We think this is the right direction. And then just make the move. Yeah.
Well, and we all have that. What is that? The main character syndrome. Like we all kind of have this feeling that the world, or everything around us revolves, and people look that close. No one's watching that closely. First of all,
what is that? Sonder? I think we brought it up in that. Yeah.
No, that's right.
You're just you are just person number 6,447,000.
One of these days you're gonna get it right.
But
you even said that. You said managing that tension of the existential, like metaphysical versus what's happening now, and finding a way to kind of bridge that gap.
It's a balance trick.
Yeah, you know, it's this tightrope of reality.
Well, Marty's always talking about what is the thing you say with the picture and the frame?
Oh, it's hard to see the picture when you are the frame.
Yeah, so it's like you can be.
I like that.
If you are 10,000 feet deep and stuff,
Yeah.
it's very difficult to. But like if you are so far detached, where
Right.
you're just like, what is the meaning of life? Really, it's like, well, then of course
Who
you're
am
not
I?
gonna. Yeah. Okay, so it sounds like that. I mean, those are some pretty cool things. The other one that kind of keeps propping up for me is like when you're in a dilemma, and we use that word incorrect. I will
Dilemma.
own this. I used this word incorrectly for many years. I always thought a dilemma was a hard choice. Dilemma is not a hard choice. A dilemma is a choice with no good options.
Ah, okay.
And so, like, what
I wasn't even aware of that. That's great.
Yeah, today I learned. Well,
I learned
many
something today.
many days ago. I learned.
If you learn anything today,
If you learn anything,
Learn what dilemma
is a choice with no good options.
okay.
So if you have a anecdote of
a
like
lesser
times
of
where
two
you've had
evils.
those, but like, how do you? I mean, because it's easy to say like, oh, we'll just pick the lesser of two evils, or
Right.
you know, whatever. But it's like the
well, you
process.
can't divorce the emotions that come along with that.
Yeah. So how do you typically navigate that stuff, Marty?
So there's decisions that are going to be based upon making a decision that could get very analytical and look at it almost and create like a decision-making formula of sorts. Like, what is if I were to decide to do X, Y, or Z, what is the return on, from a business standpoint? It could be your return on energy, your investment, your people, what have you. But on both a personal and a leadership side, you think about what is the present value? Like, if I make the decision, does this increase or decrease present value of fill in your number?
Whatever it is, yeah.
But you could also think of, does this align with the type of person I want to be in the future? Does this get me closer to being my future self? Does this improve my business on a larger scale, or does this improve my lifestyle? You can look at different categories and see if I make this decision, is this going to get me closer or further away to insert destination,
Desired
objective,
outcome,
goal. And that is one way leaders can get into the practice of thinking about, there's me in this conversation, but there's other people as well.
Yeah.
And that is something, when you take into account this, this is something that might be really difficult for me to do on a personal level, but it also impacts others.
Right.
I have a desire, I have a charge, I have an obligation, I have my need to lead or to take care of others. So even got to make this call, even though if it might be uncomfortable or even at times potentially detrimental to oneself for the greater good.
Yeah.
Well, and I think you we've talked a crazy amount about it, but in order to kind of have that outcome and where you look at, like, it's the compass is what? Mission, vision, values, like, I mean, we're going to bang that, gong until,
forever.
Everyone's ears go out. But if you don't have that clearly defined values, and you're, even like my wife and I, Tiffany, like we've had some pretty really difficult, hard decisions recently.
Yeah.
That had we not established very specific values, like family values, like, okay, we decide things based on the values that we have. And so a dilemma almost doesn't become a dilemma.
Yeah.
In some ways, because it's still the outcome goes in the direction of the value that we subscribe to, or that we substantiate this thought or this decision for. And like we had to make a really hard choice around just some life things. And we made the choice that most aligned with the values of our marriage and our family and our kids and future kids and friends and all those things. And so, I mean, I know it's hard because the problem is you can't make a decision. Like, even I'm just thinking me coming around with you guys at Culture Stoke. Yeah. Like, you guys have so much more emotional depth and context decision made here. Mm-hmm. So for me, it can almost be like, just go, like, let's do that. But for you guys, there's this depth of like emotion and like experience of doing things one way or another
Yeah.
that is valuable
Yeah.
in one breath, but then it can also be the thing that stops you. And I think that's been kind of this cool dynamic, even for me,
Right.
to observe of like, oh, here's where I can add value because I have this perspective that's not riddled with.
Well, you're not so close to it.
Yeah, I'm not too close to where it's like, but I'm also sometimes too removed.
Yeah.
And that's where I'm just kind of learning and trusting your guys' experience in this. And so I'm kind of curious your thoughts though.
I mean, you
on
went
that too.
You went right where my head went, because I think the thing that I have done in my life and that I have seen a lot is like the conflating of losses. So like when you have a dilemma, ostensibly that means that there's going to be a negative outcome.
Yeah.
Right. But we will conflate like taking an L on a balance sheet. It's like, oh, I lost money, with taking an L in life, where it's like, well, now I'm compromising my values. I'm compromising who I am. And we will weigh those the same. And so I've always kind of been of the ilk where if
I love that you use that word.
I love words.
That's a fantastic.
I've always been of the mind.
The ilk, yes.
I've always been of the mind that if it comes down to I'm going to lose a crap ton of money or I'm going to lose a piece of me.
Yeah.
Easy. That becomes the easy choice, right? Even in dilemmas when it's going to suck.
Yeah.
But it's going to suck way less if I can't look myself in the mirror.
But you got to have that conviction.
Yeah.
And I think that's
I've been listening to, I was listening to, Trevor Noah's podcast. Shout out Trevor Noah. I was listening to his podcast and he had Malcolm Gladwell on. And the title of the episode was Hold Tightly to Values, Hold Loosely to Ideas. And I was just like, that's really cool, because we will, particularly folks, if you're a business owner or if you're in high positions of leadership, you will look at that bottom line and be like, this is the thing.
That's it.
Okay, this is the make or break. And it's just not.
Yeah.
I mean, at the end of it, it's just not. And like, that's where it's like, all this stuff is not meaningless. Okay. If you take an L on your balance sheet, you may have to explain yourself to your board or to your shareholders. Right. But if you take an L in life, you take an L on yourself, the person you got to look in the mirror is you. And you got to say like, well, was it worth it?
Yeah.
Like, oh, maybe you were able to, make a profit that month, but you laid off 50 people to do it. Like, does that feel good? Because I'll tell you. Yeah. And I mean, so I don't know. That to me is when there's a dilemma, you should always go to the values and that matter of perspective that you talked about. It's like, are you going to be able to sleep tonight?
Dude, yeah. Well,
and I think even when you're not facing a dilemma, your values should ultimately act as your compass.
Yeah.
And there's a really very simple decision-making framework that when it all starts with your values. If you're looking to make a decision, both personally, within business, etc., does this align with your values? If it's a yes, all right, cool, let's check it out. Does this align with your vision? So specifically, it could be your vision for your business, ideally that you've shared and communicate with your team,
right?
Or that the one that you have for yourself or in your life. If you have it communicated and written down, all that much better. Cool. It does align with the vision. Can we make a business case for this?
Yeah.
Or can I make a lifestyle case? Can I make a life choice? Yes.
Yeah.
Those three things are green. Why not make the decision?
Right.
You absolutely should. But where the thing, to your point, Wes, around if we compromise our values as leaders or even just as individuals for kind of our short-term, to be a short-term gain out of like something that could really sting on a deeper level, you have to weigh the consequences of that action. Because if I need to lay off my team or do things differently to make this number, you're going to release your team. Now it's going to be I'm just going to bottom line up front. If you sacrifice your team on behalf of your numbers,
you made a very conscientious.
You make a very clear and conscientious choice, but you are now setting yourself. You did the easy thing for harder work later.
Yep.
Whereas opposed, if you kind of need to, hey, I'm gonna have to take this hit financial, but you put your team first. You made the harder choice now for an easier outcome down the road, because your team is going to recognize, hey, this was detrimental to the organization, leader, self, whomever, done for reasons that align with the values and vision, purpose, etc. Those are the people who are going to come rescue you when your numbers need it.
When your cutlass gets stuck.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean,
that's great.
The thing that the dilemma that keeps popping into my head that leaders face is when you have somebody who is obviously poor performing and not a cultural fit on your team, but hiring's hard. Hiring's expensive. Your team's already overtasked. You're already overburdened. So like the dilemma is, let this person go because they're a drain and they're obviously not happy. They're not performing. They don't align with our values.
Right.
Consequences. Now I have to put more work on my people, and now I have to spend time that I don't have to hire and interview and recruit and all the work and effort and energy, and that costs money too. Or I can choose to keep the person on because they're a warm body and they're here, and I don't have to train them even if they're not performing adequately and their values aren't great, but like it's so I mean like that's a very real dilemma we experience every single day. Is like, how do you handle that as a leader? Like what is the and I realize that we're gonna have to paint with very broad brushes here, but what is there's not necessarily a right answer, but that is definitely like there's no good outcome for that, right? So like
I actually see a positive outcome in that.
Yeah, well, I mean, as a tenacious optimist, there's always in my mind always room for, but like that's a dilemma.
Oh yeah,
that's a dilemma.
Absolutely.
Yeah, there's a real perspective.
Oh, absolutely. There's a leader that we're coaching in a very similar position that you've just described, and the thing, you can keep the person with the effort and energy to be able to improve their performance. Needing sustained and improve immediate performance improvement, that's its own conversation. But that's one path that you can absolutely focus on. Like that is going to be the conscientious choice to give this person the opportunity to turn it around.
Yep.
The other choice is I have an opportunity to either change this person's position, to let them go as a whole if they are really being an anchor that is slowing down the rest of the boat. And if you've gone through that performances conversation, my encouragement is, you know what, have a genuine conversation about not only how that person's performing, but how they feel they're performing. If this is a place that they even want to be. Yeah. And more oftentimes than not, if there's a values and misalignment that is being expressed in performance, but is generally, I just don't feel like this is the place that I fit in. This is the place that I want to be, or I belong. And that the conversation that oftentimes leaders tend to negate is you could actually have a really friendly offboarding.
Yeah.
And this in particular, like, hey, you understand this, if you had the opportunity to reapply for this job knowing exactly what you know today, would you still do it?
Would you do it?
And if there's not if there's hesitancy, let's use that as like an information gathering. If this is the place that you want to be, you don't seem to, I understand there's performance challenges. You may not be happiest here. Let's see what we can do maybe to adjust your schedule. So if you think you're going to be looking for a new job, let's adjust your hours or allow that there's time, or, hey, we know that you're looking. That is okay. And have a bit of that conversation to enable that person to be excellent elsewhere. And so,
go ahead. Keep going.
So the decision is oftentimes we look at these types of dilemmas into like very binary. And I think, Wes, you're great you say this regularly, like the truth is somewhere in the middle. And so I would think about what is that middle path that might take more creative thinking when you are faced with those two situations.
I'm kind of curious, Wes, just, you kind of pose a question, but I'm also wondering, like, that the dilemma of kind of the underperforming, non-fitting employee. I'm kind of curious, just both of your guys' experience, what percentage of that is attributed because of that is actually what's going on with that person versus organizationally, there's a lack of vision, there's a lack of values, there's a lack of mission, clear, definable outcomes for this person. And now they've just went from, because no one takes a job in apathy, generally speaking. Generally, everyone wants to do a good job. You've said this 1,000 times. Nobody wakes up and thinks, I want to do a sucky job today. Yeah. Everybody wants to do good on some level. And so I'm kind of curious you guys' experience how the burden, because to me that it comes down to a question then of burden of responsibility in that. And I know we're talking about being a team, leaders, bringing everyone, but I'm kind of curious too, how you juxtapose that for leaders, because I do think that there's probably that dilemma exists, but to our point, we've said, hey, we kind of need to identify the origins at times before we can really move forward with. I don't know. That's kind of my thinking.
I am always going to default to the organization probably has some room to grow, because there's a bit of a it's a fun debate to have, but it's not necessarily a productive one. But it's whose responsibility is it to motivate? Because like the person plays a role, the individual contributor plays a role in their motivation,
right?
But the organization their first thought should not be, Marty, you need to get your stuff together and get motivated. We've got work to do.
Come on now.
It's like, no. So to answer your question bluntly, I'm always going to default to the organization probably has room to grow.
As if I didn't know the answer.
And that doesn't mean that they're not doing work and they're not doing, but if you have people that are not motivated,
right,
it's probably you that has some work to do. But it dovetails into like the other dilemma, because I was going to flip it on its head of like, what if you're a person that's in an organization that you feel like you don't fit, and you're miserable and not happy, but also I really need this job,
right?
Opportunities are slim out there. It's hard to find. Like, I'm not going to find a place that pays me this much. Like, just to kind of to juxtapose the dilemma to the individual, because there are lots of people out there that are looking for a job simply because Maslow's hierarchy of needs. I need a paycheck.
Right.
I need food. I need clothes. I need shelter. So, hopefully I'm at least applying to a field that I'm moderately interested in. So
I kind of like,
I think I talked about this in my book, but like, I would never apply to be a painter. I hate painting. Hate it. Like, I don't hate many things in life. I hate painting. Like the detail work, the activities itself, the taping, the painting, the cleanup, the mess. Don't like any of it. I would never apply, because it doesn't matter how great that culture is. Gonna hate that job. Yeah. Gonna hate it. We painted this place right here. I love you two dudes. We were having a good old time. Hated every minute of it because I hate painting.
I strongly agree with you.
So like, I mean, we can kind of keep, but I think the answers are going to be very similar contextually about the organization struggling with this dilemma and the individual. But I also like want to send it out to, because there's lots of people that are just individual contributors, team members,
right,
that are in this spot where they feel trapped in a place where it's like, well, I feel miserable, but also I gotta eat.
Right. Gotta
so
eat.
like, how do you, I mean, what's your experience been? What's your experience been? Like, I'll open it up.
Yeah. So we're going to circle back to, you said, does the organization have the responsibility to motivate people? And I will say to a degree, but I think the stronger responsibility that an organization has is to teach people.
Yep.
Because if you don't teach somebody and they're motivated, you can still have a motivated idiot. Like, you need to have somebody not to use that as a pure derogatory term, more as an illustration, but you need to understand like what to do, how to do it, degrees of satisfaction, etc.
Right.
Once you have, I will say this in capital letters, you need to teach your people. If you don't teach your people, you're doing not only your people a disservice, but you're doing your organization a significant disservice.
Right.
Yeah. So I would say once an organization has taught people to do the right things rightly, that's when motivation is something that now becomes an imperative. But you can't do that before you've taught them. So I'll just leave it there. But coming back from a situation of somebody's like, hey, I need this job.
Yeah.
I need to be able to provide for myself, my family, roof over head, food on plate, etc. And you don't feel that you are the right fit. It's a place you wake up, you don't want to be, etc. That's a really crappy place to be. I've been there in the past and realized that it has a significant impact, not only on your sense of like just your joy, but it also really starts impacting and kind of shifting your identity of self.
Yeah. Your overall well-being.
Yeah, you're over like everything.
Person.
Yeah. And so my encouragement would be to, if there's not to bring this down into like the grossest binary that it could be, is that you can either stay with peace or stay in joy or leave in peace. And in looking at that and realizing like, hey, there's a middle road to it. Normally I look at those two angles as those are the only two choices. The middle road that now is kind of appearing to myself is to try to understand, like, what is it?
Yeah.
I'm in this car. I'm stuck here. What is it about this place that I don't like?
Yeah.
What is it about maybe my peers or my coworkers, etc. that it's like, really, I'm waking up this morning, I'm feeling awesome because I have to go to work.
Yeah.
Recognize kind of that situation where you genuinely may feel stuck and be like, get out of the car, look to see how deep you're in, like, what the heck can I do around me to make this a little bit better?
Yeah.
What can I do? Whether it's I can be in control of myself, my attitudes, my thoughts, my feelings, my behaviors. What could I potentially do to make this a little bit better for myself?
Yeah. Sure.
And that, I think, is if you can start to find the things and look around and you're like, I don't really like that. Think about what would it look like if I did? Mm-hmm. And how could I maybe take a little bit of action to do something that, hey, makes this a little bit better than it was yesterday.
Yeah.
Maybe other people might start noticing. Maybe I might do things again and again to the point where this is actually pretty decent. I have some agency. I have some, maybe it's you don't have an entire department or a team or an organization, but the people around you and what you're doing, you can make better if you choose to.
Yeah.
But it comes down to that choice.
Yeah.
And so maybe it's not just I'm going to stay in joy. Maybe it's like, I'm going to stay and plant seeds of potential joy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I'm going to do things that can maybe make this better for myself or others.
Dude.
And maybe if I can then get other people to see, maybe we cultivate that, we make it better and become our own catalyst for change.
Yeah. Well, and I think too, we tend to, we talked about this in a previous episode too, that negativity bias. If we get in that echo chamber, that those choices, and you do, Wes, you do this a lot where you kind of like, it's somewhere in the middle. You're very, and I actually really appreciate that about you, because I tend to be a little more kind of like polarizing in my thinking at times, but
yeah, that's why I don't like you.
Exactly. Speaking of, no, but there is this, I love that. Because what it requires of us, though, is that introspection, that willingness to be honest with ourselves about our own shortcomings. And then also, I would even say, we've said this a lot of leaders and organizations, but even of ourselves. It gives you the opportunity to be empathetic towards yourself.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
What is it about? And honestly, I in my experience, anecdotal, don't quote me on this, but for me, 9 times out of 10, there's something going on in my life that has almost nothing to do with work. There's some sort of tension or friction or pain.
Life happens outside of work?
What?
That seems silly.
Almost exclusively, it comes down to, and now I'm not saying there can't be miserable workplaces. There is. There certainly is.
Yeah.
But even then, like, is it as bad as you think it is? Is it at times?
Could be.
It can be.
Yeah.
But again, I'm just coming back to my own personal experience of that is I so seldom come to that place of objectivity about the workplace because I'm so stuck in my own, like,
well, that's what I was
personal rut.
That's what I was going to say is like, when you're like, well, is it really that bad? And I'm like, I am sure. I am confident that there are places out there that if we went to, we would go, wow, this is actually a living, breathing dumpster fire. Like, wow.
Break glass because it's an emergency.
Don't like, you know, if they come to us like that, there are. But I would say that the vast majority of places, and I think this is why, and we're going to bring it fully back to like getting unstuck.
Yeah.
Because this is the reason that I saved this one for last. Can you tell I've been thinking about this a lot? Okay. The reason that the reason I was saving this one for last is because this is the place where I feel like I have experienced in my journeys the most people are stuck here in this spot where it's like I am miserable at work, you know, or, you know, maybe miserable is too strong a word. I'm just this. My
not
work
happy, not
is
content,
I
whatever,
am disengaged. Okay, I am generally apathetic about my work. Like, you
which
know,
is
maybe,
a vast majority of
maybe I don't.
70-ish% or something.
Yeah, thanks, Gallup.
Yeah. Quoting.
But this is because the idea of I am, you know, I have to have a job. Okay, which, you know, we do. We have bills to pay. We have things to do. But it doesn't. The work is hard. I think I say this a lot. The work is hard. We don't have to make it harder by treating each other poorly. That's culture.
Love that.
But there really is something to taking control and ownership of your life. And I remember having conversations with people, you know, at a job that I had that was very good. I mean, objectively speaking, great wages, great benefits, great perks. And they were like, I don't like this place, but like, where am I going to go? Where am I going to go that's going to treat me, that's going to pay me this way? You know, and it's the whole golden handcuffs thing.
Right.
And my answer to them has always been, well, like, well, what's the price of your happiness? Because if you're like miserable all the time, like that paycheck doesn't seem to be fixing that. And so you do have your options, which is either like I can go and by the way, people that I've had this conversation with have left the organization, found a place that maybe didn't pay them as much, maybe didn't have the best benefits, but like exponentially life better.
Yeah.
Right. As a person who's done that, I can tell you, I took a massive pay cut, you know, one time, but I just was like, this is not the place for me anymore. And so I guess all of this to say, it does take a little bit of this objectivity of like, wow, this is my life. What is the price of my happiness? And then it's like, I think we were giving a talk to a college class, and one of the students came up after and she said like, well, like where is the line for like when the you know, like, cause like, I imagine that I have some responsibility in building the culture, but you know, what if nobody else wants to move? What's the line? You know, where is that? And I do think it goes back to kind of what Marty was saying is like, you have some agency here where it's like, you don't have to like play this game of chicken and wait for everyone else to change. You can, if it's worth it to you, if that paycheck is really worth it to you, you can make some work and make some moves and make some energy to try and change it. And it can be as simple as like, hey team, do you guys feel good about what's happening here? Cause like, I don't feel that great about it. And if their answer is like, no, we love it, that might be an answer in and of itself. You're like, okay, it's me. It's hi, I'm the problem. It's right. And then it may be time for me to leave in peace.
Right.
But if they're like, yeah, you know what, like this place kind of sucks. I don't really like it either.
Yeah.
You don't have to wait for leadership to make that change. Because again, leadership, you in my experience, you would love them to be the ones out in front leading the charge. You would love that. My experience, when it comes to cultural change specifically, leadership is typically about 1.5 years behind everyone else.
Wow. Really?
That's anecdotal.
I mean, it makes sense.
Anecdotally.
It makes sense.
But when I say behind, what I mean is with their enthusiasm, like with their because they've been promoted to positions of leadership behaving a particular way. So like we always say culture, big boat, tiny rudder, leadership culture. exceptionally large boat, particularly small rudder, because they have lots of learned behavior and learned experience of like, I got promoted to this position
because of
behaving this particular way. So it's harder for them. It's a harder pill for them to swallow. It's like, but I was so successful, I got to this point, and now you're asking me to do things different. It's tough. And so the hope is, and this is why our approach is always top enabled all in, the hope is that they just come alongside and don't get in the way. Like that's the, and when I say hope, I don't mean like you have to beg and plead, but like that's the attitude you would hope that they would take, is like, I just don't want to be an impediment. Like, I see what you're doing. I'm not feeling confident to be the one out in front yet, because I don't think I'm there because I don't have the know-how or whatever, but I definitely don't want to be the bottleneck either.
Right.
So bringing it back to the individual though, you do have that option of like, do I want to be the catalyst for change here? Or does it feel like maybe this just really isn't the place? Because to me, that's the real personal choice, I think.
Yeah.
And when it comes to the leadership component, there, to your point, there is the appetite and enthusiasm for change may be different at various levels. People kind of, you can think of all the way from individual contributors to team leads to leaders in general. But I think one of the things where we see that boat turn fastest is when you do have that top enabled all in, but the leaders who are actively and willing to like carry the torch for their team and demonstrate the ideal behaviors that they wish to see.
Exponential.
Oh, absolutely. It's not just them about the leader carrying the torch, like, hey, follow me, this is where we're going. This is about the leader lighting the torch for other people at the same time.
Yeah.
So not only can that enthusiasm be amplified through leadership, but that change and that success can be really accelerated. And I believe when it comes to both kind of the conversation around change and getting unstuck is like, hey, how do we get this Oldsmobile finally out of the mud? And I think that we're even in the experience, like we gathered sticks, we put sticks under and rocks underneath the back tires to try to get traction. It still didn't speed out. My dad was a rep for a winery, so we took like display boards and tried to get in the car to like all these things, and we still weren't able to get it out. But thank goodness at one point this group of 4-wheel drives came by that had a tow strap, and they saw that we were in need, talked to us. They're like, hey, let's help you out. Strap the car, working together, we're able to get out of it. And so I think that's where oftentimes we feel, even when I'm personally stuck, like, oh, I have to do this by myself. But I think when you can very much not only rely on the help, but even ask for the help, because for me, that is very difficult. Ask for the help from others. That is, they can provide that actual or like illustrative like tow strap to like get you out. Because it's one of those things that if you are deep in the stuck as much as you can,
in the stuck, that's a shirt.
I like it.
It is not uncommon for one person not to be able to get out of it by themselves.
It
is going to require others to help and kind of be an active participant in that like rescue. And so that is where your team can help you get unstuck, where other peers, a coach, somebody else who's there who can see a different or better way, a different approach to get you out of it. But then once you are out of it, you don't have to beat yourself up for the fact that you got in there in the first place. Life happens. And that is a tuition for your new learning, new growth. And this is something that you can not only grow from, but I look back on that experience and that afternoon is one of my fondest childhood memories of like, it was an adventure. It was really cool. And I remember driving home once we hit pavement, we just had mud flinging everywhere. Just all over. Cars were looking, just kind of looking and honking. It was pulled up to the car wash, just covered in mud. And I thought it was the car never looked so cool.
Heck yeah.
And that's one of the things, like those stuck moments can be your story. And life is not all mountaintops, it's valleys. And just like the blade of a saw, you have your teeth that go up to the peak, and then you have your valleys. The saw would not cut if it was all just peaks and plateaus. You have to have those valleys to be able to get that type of traction, to be able to make progress towards the things that you really want to be able to accomplish and achieve.
Yeah.
Dang. Fantastic.
I think the reason why this has been sticking with me, just like, because I just see too many people and too many organizations get their car stuck and then decide they just have to build a house there now.
Yeah.
That like, okay, well, I'm just going to build my house here. This is where I am now.
This is how we are.
And it just doesn't have to be that way. And you have the ability to change your situation pretty much universally. Like there are, whether it's change of perspective, change of behavior, change of venue, change of attitude. But I think it does come with the first and foremost acknowledgement. Oh, I'm stuck.
Yeah.
Life's not supposed to be like this. Not supposed to feel like this. This isn't life. I don't need to build my house around my car that's stuck in the mud.
Yeah.
I can actually do something with it. I need to acknowledge that first. Then I can reach out to my support network. Hey, I'm stuck.
Yeah.
So, but then comes the next big step. Got to do something about it.
Right.
Got to actually make a move. And even if it's the wrong move.
Just make a move.
Make a move. Singular. Go. Take a step.
Move.
Take a first step.
Do it.
Okay. And maybe you get your foot stuck in the mud.
Right.
And you're like, ooh.
At least you're out of the car.
I should not go this way.
Yeah.
360 degrees. There's 360 degrees of other directions you could go.
I love that. I feel like that's a really great place to kind of hang our hat on the conversation. But you said kind of thing there at the end, and I just love that we wrap this back to that story. But these 4x4s, the help aspect of this, I do. That becomes, this is something that even recently I've been really just personally wrestling with, is like how hard it is to say like, hey, help me, or even just admit that you're there.
Yeah.
That single greatest thing. I mean, I sent you guys like a pretty like heavy text like Thursday. I'm like, dude, I am stuck with like some life. Like my wife's grandma just passed, and COVID, and like we lost our kid. Like this year has sucked for me and my family. But honestly, like even just talking, like the serendipitous moments where you and I talked, and having those people that you can just be like straight with. I'm stuck, dude. I'm here. That changes everything. And I think that's where having the team, the trust, and then maybe those 4x4s, I don't know, were those guys' names Marty and Wes? Because I'm pretty sure that they had a Culture Stoke sticker on the back. But for real, like that's why we exist at Culture Stoke. It's like we believe that people can get stuck, but we also know that there's a way out. There's a way that we can help them. There's a way that businesses can have happier people and better results. And that doesn't need to be this like horrible thing. It can be fun. Like I promise, like it can be really fun. It's going to be hard, but it can be fun. And so any last wrap up thoughts, any, sage things, or should we just cheers and call it a day?
I will just say that it is that cultural change. Your car will get muddy, but it will be a lot of fun, and you will be so thrilled with the destination that you end up. And it's a bit like chasing the horizon, but it's the best part. It's super fun. And I think the other thought that comes to mind is that really nothing changes unless we change ourselves.
I mean, the last 10 or 12 years has been kind of the because I don't know if you guys I was not as put together as I am now. I went through a lot of really, really tough, just, dealing with lots of things to get to the place that I am today. And honestly, it's not, I don't think that it's because I've got it all figured out or anything like that. I think it's actually the opposite. It's just the acknowledgement. Like, I don't think I'm ever going to have this stuff ever all figured out. Like, and there's something very freeing of just like, you know what, we are we are all in this thing together and we are all a mess and we're all just trying to figure. There's something very unifying and very freeing about letting go of that need to be the one, to be perfect, to be like, to have it all together. Like there are days where I wake up and I look in the mirror and it's like, I just want to cry and go back to sleep today because I don't know. But I think there's something very freeing in that to where it's like, you know what? I don't need to have it all figured out. Like I am just going to cling tight to my values. Yeah. Just be best version of myself that I can. Be able to, at the end of the day,
that moment, even.
At the end of the day, look at myself in the mirror and say like, well, maybe I didn't make all the right choices. But I still was me. And I still, embodied the person that I'm trying to be in and maybe helped a couple people along the way. Yeah. That feels pretty good. Yeah. Like that to me has been the kind of the revelation, the win is just life. that releasing of the need to be all put together all the time.
And also release for speaking into my situation, release the need to be perfect. Yeah. That the need that mistakes are a bad thing. Yeah. Mistakes are learning. Mistakes are opportunities for growth. And for me, my shift is instead of trying to be like, get everything right, is like, just make better mistakes.
Yeah. Let's do it.
That's fantastic. Yeah. Just make better mistakes. All right, boys. Well, hey, that was a good one. That was a fun one. I really enjoyed that one. But Culture Stoke, cheers, my friends, compadres, cheers. Happy holidays. And as we always say, Culture Stoke, happier people,
better results.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Thanks for listening to the Culture Stoke podcast. If you enjoyed the show, don't forget to like, subscribe, and rate us wherever you tune in. Share this episode with anybody who could use a culture boost. Until next time, keep stoking the fire.